Hi, everyone. It's Becca Bertrand, the Executive Director of Newport Film. I am so glad that you've all joined us for another really amazing live Q&A with a film director. This week, we have been screening through Newport Film Virtual the two-part film Lance, about Lance Armstrong. It's been a really incredible journey, this whole process of virtual screenings, and we're so grateful for so many of you to have joined us on the process. I think we're on week 9 or 10 now. So we've been able to screen some incredible documentary titles, and stick with us because we're going to keep doing this every single week. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by the film's director. But if you have any questions for her, you can feel free to type those in the comments area. You can do that either on YouTube, or if you're watching through newportfilm.com, or on Facebook, and we'll be sure to get those questions answered for you. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Newport Film's co-founder and artistic director, Andrea Van Buren, and the film's director, Marina Zinovich. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Can you hear me, Becca?
Yeah, you sound great.
Great. So just a word about Marina, because she is so incredibly accomplished. She is an Emmy Award-winning and prolific director whose films have been praised for their powerful storytelling and their thoughtful, sensitive approach to difficult subjects and controversial people. Marina's latest film, Lance, a psychological portrait of cyclist Lance Armstrong, premiered at this year's Sundance Film Festival and is part of ESPN's 30 for 30, which airs on Sunday nights. Other films of Marina's include the critically acclaimed HBO documentary Robin Williams' Come Inside My Mind, National Geographic's Water and Power, A California Heist, also Fantastic Lies about the Duke lacrosse scandal, Richard Pryor, Omit the Logic, which won the NAACP Image Award for Best TV Documentary, and then 2 films on Roman Polanski. Marina is an active member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the Directors Guild of America, and the International Documentary Association. Marina, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I know you've been really busy with lots of press.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to start right in on the questions.
Sure.
The first question I have is, has Lance seen the finished film yet? And if so, what does he think?
So I went to Austin and screened the film for Lance back in December. And, you know, I think part 1, which is The Rise, was easier to take in, more so than The Fall, which is, you know, I think hard to kind of see. So I think he liked parts of it, and parts of it he is kind of coming to terms with. Excuse me. So yeah, it's been fascinating to see kind of the reaction that that we've gotten to the film.
Yeah. I mean, I would think, well, not gonna, Becca, I want to share my questions with you. So
I was just curious why the film happened now. Like, was there something that made Lance say, like, okay, now I'm ready to tell my true story, or has he always been ready? And I know there's definitely some criticism that it's like, oh, here we are, you know, more showcasing of Lance. But I think, you know, it's a really interesting portrayal, and it really is. It seems truly honest. So I'm curious about, you know, kind of how it started.
You know, the film came about because I think for him, I don't think he was ready 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he was ready 3 years ago. The film kind of coincided with, and we were going to have a framework around the final lawsuit, which is the U.S. Postal lawsuit, which was supposed to take place in May of 2018. Mm-hmm. So they ended up settling that case. So we kind of had to quickly pivot and continue to follow him, but it's like we were hoping that there would be a trial, and they settled. Why now? For me as a filmmaker, this particular moment in time for him, and I'm talking about 2 years ago when I started, was kind of a moment in his life when a page was turning. He'd had so many lawsuits and what have you, and this was the final one, and it was over. So I feel that he was ready to tell his story, and it was just a moment in his life that, like, for example, if I was starting the film today as opposed to in March of 2018, he'd be in a different place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And do you think when you were interviewing him, I mean, it seems like you built such a good relationship with him. I mean, he multiple times he says, I'm being honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, what's that? Sorry.
Did you ever wonder if he was? I mean, he so famously didn't tell the truth. So what do you do with that as a filmmaker?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like he had nothing to lose. So I felt from him an incredible candor, no kind of artifice. I felt like he was straightforward, and we got along. I mean, there was a time when I was known for making films about people who weren't in my film. So I think when you've made archive films or films about people who are no longer with us, and you actually have like a living, breathing, human being in front of you who's willing to go there, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
He's also incredibly smart and charismatic and funny and light on his feet and has a lot of fun. And so it was playful.
Mm-hmm.
So on the one hand, I took all that in, but I also knew the history of the bullying and the lying and the cheating. So it's kind of like everything is kind of circling in my head as I'm engaging with him.
Yeah.
But I'm not really, of course, on some level, I'm thinking, is he lying to me? But if I felt that, I would call him on it.
Right. Yeah.
Did you know him before you started?
I didn't. No, I met him. ESPN thought I would be the right person to make this film. And it was Libby Geist who called me and said, what do you think about making a film about Lance Armstrong? And it was like, why? There have been films, 2 nonfiction films, a fiction film, a ton of books. And she was like, I think he's ready to talk. Enough time had passed. I don't know if it's enough time for certain people, but it was enough time for him. He spent a lot of time in therapy, really kind of processing what he went through. So he's gone through a lot himself, that other people don't necessarily know about. And that was also interesting to me. He's like made peace with it as much as he can right now.
Yeah. But I do, it seems like any pushback that he was giving you, you chose to include in the film. So was there anything that you thought, no, I'm going to leave this out for one reason or another, or?
No, not at all. I mean, it was just like, show it all. Show him looking at his watch, show him, that was part of the fun.
Yeah.
And we were honest with each other. I mean, he told me, ask me anything, don't be afraid. And I'm like, are you kidding? Okay. It's not often that happens. Usually people are hiding something and you're trying to get them to tell it to you.
Yeah.
With their body language or their eyes, so it's always like a really interesting kind of fencing match. And don't let my lightness and excitement about it let you think that I didn't do the due diligence, because I was very hard on him. But I'm thinking about it, I haven't really done a Q&A on this film since Sundance, so let me bask for a moment. I've been at home not doing Q&As. It was fun, and it was challenging, and it was hard, and it was hard to have this film end.
And was it ESPN, sorry, that chose that you were going to do a 2-part film, as opposed to a a 90-minute traditional length documentary?
Well, I think after their success with OJ, they're really looking to go deeper. And that is just like amazing, because a lot of these stories have so much more that you can go into, and you were limited by time.
Yeah.
So I think like the combination of ESPN willing to go longer, whereas other streamers and what have you are willing to go shorter, like you can kind of let your film be the length it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
I always wanted it to be, I wanted it to feel immersive. I wanted it to be long, but not too long. I mean, what was amazing at Sundance was just that people, you know, couldn't stop watching it. Like it's 3.5 hours long, but it flies by, and it could have been longer. But I don't know. I feel like we got, yikes, I feel like we got the right amount of time. So it's a 2-part film.
Yeah.
The Rise and the Fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it plays, I watched it just back to back, and it plays just, I never thought like, okay, we're on hour 3, you know, you really are. I mean, I felt that, you know, it was so captivating. I'm kind of curious, if, and we've been talking on our team, and something that our staff was wondering is like, okay, so was he the same when you were asking him questions and when you weren't asking him questions? Was it kind of like, I'm turning it on and then turning it off?
No, he's the same. He's really the same. The dogs agree. The dogs are big fans of Lance. They just wanted to let you know. Um, no, he's very light. You know, he's an athlete. He's competitive. He's light on his feet. He's moving and gliding, and it's kind of like trying to bottle up that energy. So of course he's, you know, he has different moods. You know, I interviewed him 8 times from March of 2018 to August of 2019, and there were different, depending on where we were and how long we went. You know, my cinematographer Nick Higgins realized that he was a better interview. Well, we both realized that he was a better interview after he worked out. And Nick had an interesting story that he had made a film about ballerinas, and he said, you know, it was weird with them too. They needed to get the workout out first, and then they could sit. So we quickly realized that he was, you know, we let him get his workout, and then he'd be kind of there, just ready to go.
Yeah.
And
otherwise he's thinking of it, and he's like knowing that this is happening. I got to go do this later, and so
right,
it's not really there. Interesting. Yeah. That's cool.
Were his teammates at all, you know, wary about sitting down, or maybe it was painful for them? Sounds like the wife of one of his teammates, it was probably it seemed like it was maybe the hardest on her.
Yeah, I mean, it depended on who you're talking about. You know, certain people said yes right away. Other people weren't sure. For Betsy Andreu, she was, you know, she has a very, she doesn't have a great relationship with Lance, with good reason, but she wasn't sure whether she wanted to take part or not. She was very interested in knowing how the story originated and what have you. So, you know, it's always like that it depends on the person. I think for a lot of these guys, you know, her husband didn't want to talk. That's who I really wanted to talk to, but he didn't want to talk. For a lot of these guys, it's, you know, it's bringing up, it's good and bad, in the sense that like you want to talk about something in the past, but it brings it up. It brings stuff up for you, depending on your part in the story. So, yeah, I mean, everyone was different, but there were people I had to talk into, like Jonathan Vaughters didn't want to talk. I courted him for a long time. Travis Tigert from USADA, you know, I ended up using him a little bit. You know, all these people, even if they're in the film for just a couple of bites, quotes, I would still sit down and do like 2 or 3 hour interviews with them. It's just kind of like when you get to the editing room and you're constructing the story and you see what really fits best. And a lot of people got left on the cutting room floor. So they just didn't serve the story. I mean, you have to be really ruthless when you're putting it together. So
yeah, that one scene that you were shooting, I think he was in his kitchen with his current fiance in Aspen, was just, to me, so telling, and showed, that was, to me, a real window into kind of his psyche in a way. Even though it was a short scene when he cut his finger. So I thought that was really interesting. It added a lot to the film that I would never have, I would never
Oh,
have.
good. Yeah, we weren't sure. I mean, we shot a lot of verite with him. We didn't use it all. And each scene really had to kind of earn its keep. And that was one that some of the people in the office didn't think we should keep it. But I loved it because I felt that it showed so much about who he was. And, she was kind of rolling her eyes at him, which is always kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I think people want to see him bleed.
Yeah.
So, and then he had the bandage in the film. So on some level, it's like, why does he have a bandage? Like, somebody's going to be asking that. So
yeah, I thought that the scene that made me be like, oh wow, he's an interesting person, was when he was speaking to his son's football team. And maybe I was feeling it like, oh my God, if like my dad were doing that and messed up my number, like that is so embarrassing. And he's just like, yeah, I'm 35. Like I was like, oh.
Yeah, we had to keep that in to show just kind of like, poor Lance having a bad dad moment.
Yeah.
We all have them, and his son, Luke, is just so understanding and so great. And I was so thrilled that he was willing to take part.
Yeah, definitely. We have a question here from someone about one of the other athletes. How about Greg LeMond? Did he want to talk?
He didn't. So Greg, I tried. I spoke to his wife, but he did not want to talk. And so he had to be in the film. So we included him in archive.
Okay.
Becca, do you have more questions?
Yeah, I was also curious about, I know towards the end we learned that now, okay, Lance is going to be a commentator for the 2019 tour, and then reading kind of subsequent articles about it and how people feel about someone who's banned from the sport and can no longer participate, yet here he is speaking as an expert. There's some kind of pull there, and I wonder, was he, when you were filming, did he know he was going to do it, or was that later on?
He didn't know. It ended up happening later. So he is an expert, by the way.
Oh yeah, of course. Oh my
and
God.
he has a very popular podcast that's it's called The Move. He does it with a radio guy named JB Hager, and he has George Hincapie on it, and Johan Brunel, and all sorts of guest cyclists. He called me to tell me that NBC wanted to offer him to commentate, and part of that was they were getting an interview with him as well. And I didn't really, I knew that they were never going to get as deep as we were, so it wasn't like I had a problem with it. I mean, it's very interesting that someone in that position gets asked to do that, and how polarizing it is. I mean, you will have those people who kick and scream for good reason that they don't think he should be doing it, but then you have the people who selected him to do it and actually think he has a lot to say. And we were going to include that in the film. We ended up putting it in a card at the end. It ended up not being. It's definitely interesting, and that's why we put it as a card at the end. But it, just kind of filming him commentating wasn't that interesting for the film. But it is extremely interesting in his career and his life, and him, trying to be a voice of the sport, because he is. I mean, do you know how popular that podcast is?
Yeah,
it really is. So it's just interesting to see, he's a polarizing figure who a lot of people have incredibly strong reactions to because he lied, because he cheated, and because he bullied people. So you know.
But it also speaks to, you know, he was such an important person in the popularization of cycling in
Totally.
because it was, you know, that he was totally the face of what made it a popular sport here. So I think, you know, I think it's totally on the one hand, I'm like, oh, I don't know how I feel about it, but I also feel like if you were going back through all of those races and you took out every single guy that was doing EPO, what would the race have looked like?
There would be a lot of guys missing.
Yeah.
So that doesn't take away from what Lance did, but that's a very important part that a lot of people don't want to see. But it's the truth.
That's one of the main things I took away from this film is that, you know, across the board, it seems like the majority of the people were doping. So the fact that he had cancer and came back and won the race, it sounds like he's, you know, however many times he's racing against people who didn't have cancer and who are taking the drugs. So, I mean, he, no matter how it comes down, he's accomplished so much. I mean, he's so impressive, and he's so dynamic, and he's like, you know, what he did with Livestrong. And look, I'm not vindicating him, but I really, you know, came away from the film thinking, okay, he might be a jerk, but boy, has he accomplished a lot, and he's an impressive character as well. So I'm not sure if that's what you wanted me to come away thinking.
Well, yes, I did. I wanted you to kind of go back and forth about how you felt about him.
Yeah.
You know, he's a complicated character who did, you know, raise a lot of money for cancer. Anytime I say anything positive, I can hear the negative voices in my head of the haters because they are so loud and they have good reason to be. But it's kind of like, how long must that continue? You know, it's fascinating. I think that's why a documentary could be made. Well, so many documentaries, but a documentary could be made about him, just kind of facing everything, you know, just straight on. And that's why I chose to do it. I mean, how could I turn it down?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We have another question. Would his ex-wife speak? Did she?
No, Kristen Armstrong unfortunately didn't want to take part. There is a beautiful moment in the film that's archived that she allowed us to use, which is when she's talking about her son after Lance is on Oprah, and she tells him that he doesn't have to go to school. And, you know, you can take the day off. And he's like, no, I want to go. And she talks about dropping him off. I had to have this in the film because it was so meaningful. And she says, you know, I dropped him off and I saw him take one step into manhood. And I just thought that was so beautiful because it was like how much this affected, you know, that kid and their lives. And so.
Yeah. Oh, man.
He was so brave to go to school.
Exactly. I know.
Seriously.
I know. Having a teenager, that's why it meant so much to me. I mean, it's like, could you imagine like kids saying stuff, you know?
The haters have children and they probably heard what their parents said.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead, Becca. It's hard enough in the same room. You want to go ahead?
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to say, you know, I don't know if you have any other questions, Andrea, but we want to, you know, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Marina. And also,
of course,
if people haven't seen the two-part film yet, you can still watch it until midnight tomorrow night on our website, newportfilm.com. And it's also available on ESPN. And the second half is premiering next week?
No, Sunday night, May 31st at 9 p.m. Eastern. So if you've missed part one, you can see that at 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. And then part two is at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. I also think it's on ESPN Plus Someone told me they watched it on Hulu.
Oh,
It's out there.
Mm-hmm.
So
awesome. Well, yeah. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can head to newportfilm.com also, and then we'll be back next week with another exciting film that we're going to be streaming, and we'll keep you on the edge of your seat about what that one's going to be until next week.
it's so great you guys are doing this.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's really
To
fun.
keep people engaged. It's really awesome. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And also this this will be available, the Facebook Live will be available after it's no longer live. It'll still be living on our Facebook page. So if there's anyone that you know, that wants to access it after the fact, it'll just go on to Facebook, Newport Film, and it's there.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina.
Of course.
Talk soon.
Okay.